Okay, so here we're going to learn about the greatest common factor and factor by grouping. So, first of all, we want to find the GCF, greatest common factor, of the numerical coefficients, and then of the variable factors. And the product of the factors found in those two parts is going to be our greatest common factor. So let's start with that, and then we'll do the factor by grouping here in just a minute. So we are going to find the GCF. That is short for greatest common factor. So for example 1, if we have 20x cubed y and the term 10x squared y squared and 35x cubed. If we're looking at those three terms, we want to find what number do they all have in common. Well, they're all multiples of 5. And then as far as the x's, we have an x cubed, an x squared, and an x cubed. So the most that we can pull out will be 2 x's, an x squared. We can't do x cubed because he doesn't have an third x to pull out. And then this one has a y, this one has a y squared, this one doesn't have a y. So this will be our GCF right there. And we just end up with multiplication, whatever you pull out. All right, let's look at example 2. So if we have 30 a cubed b, 48 a squared b squared, and 18 ab cubed. Well, I have to look at what all of these factor. I know that 30 is going to be 5 times 6. You can look at it as 3 times 10, but if I pull out the 5, which is a prime number, 6 is my number left over because none of these will divide by 5. However, I know that 48 divides by 6 and 18 divides by 6. And you can do some factor trees if you want to figure out if you're not sure what the numbers are. For the most part, we won't be doing ones like this. We'll do the ones like we have here in just a minute, and those will be a little bit more obvious. So we can factor out a 6. If I look at my a's, I have an a cubed, an a squared, and a single a. Well, a single a is the only thing I can pull out. I have a b squared, a b cubed. So everybody has a b this time. So I have to pull out the lowest one. You want to pull out the greatest number, but the lowest exponent, because they all have to have that available. So 6ab would be our GCF for this one. All right, so now we're going to look at what if we had some polynomial terms. So example 3, if we have 8x squared plus 4, this will be more of what we're going to be working with the GCF. We need to look at what they have in common as far as the number. I usually, if I'm looking at this, I'll see if the smaller number, the 4, does it divide into 8? It does. So that helps me see that this will become a 4 on the outside. They both don't have an x, so I can't factor out the variable. 8 divided by 4 will get me 2. And then I still have the x squared. And 4 divided by 4 will get me 1. Now you have to make sure you have 2 terms in your parentheses because you had 2 terms to begin with. And you can check your answer and go 4 times 2 is 8 times x squared. Okay, I got that term back. 4 times 1 will get me 4. So I can double check by multiplying it back. All right, let's look at another term. What if we have 6x squared plus 15x plus 9? So again, I have to look at all 3 numbers. What do they all have in common? Well, 6 is only divisible by 2 and a 3, but these are not even, so I can't use the 2. So let's look at the 3. 15 is divisible by 3, and so is 9. So 3 will be the number. Do they all have an x? They do not. So I'm just going to divide 3 out. 6 divided by 3 is 2 times the x squared. 15 divided by 3 will be 5 times the x. And 9 divided by 3 will get us 3. And I can multiply that back. 3 times 2 is 6x squared. 3 times 5 is 15 times the x. And 3 times 3 is 9. All right, what if we have 8a to the 4th minus 2a cubed? Well, my smallest number is 2, so I can look and go and see that 8 divides by 2. So 2 will be our number, and when I look at, they both have the variable this time, and so I'm going to pull the smallest exponent, so a cubed. So 8 divided by 2 is 4. A to the 4th divided by a cubed, well, you subtract your exponent, so 4 minus 3 will leave you with 1a. And if you're not sure about this, like, how are we doing this? Take your 8a to the 4th and put it over to a cubed, because you're doing division. Well, 2 will go into 8 4 times, so that's where we end up with the 4. And with our exponents, we will subtract them. So we'll take this and we'll subtract the 3 from the 4 and get 1a. So you can use your exponent rules in that to help you be sure you're getting what you need for your answer. All right, we have a minus. 2 divided by 2 is going to get us 1. And the a cubes, well, this is the same thing, right? So it's going to be a 1. And again, I can multiply it back out. 2 times 4 is 8. A cubed times a to the 1st. We add our exponents. We get back to 4. And then 2a cubed times a negative 1 would be negative 2a cubed. All right, what about 3x minus 8y cubed? Well, I have 3 and an 8. That is not, 3 is a prime number. It's not divisible by anything else, and it does not go into 8, so we can't pull out a number. And x, this one doesn't have, and this one doesn't have the y, so there is no common factors. Other than 1. So that means this is going to be a prime. So it is not factorable. So no common factor other than 1. And sometimes you'll have that. So you might have to, when we get into other kinds of factoring, we may only factor out of 1 because that's all we have. All right, let's look at another one. We have a negative 9 x to the 4th y squared plus 5 x squared y squared plus 7x y squared. So I have to look at my numbers. I have a 9, a 5, and a 7. Well, 5 and 7 are both prime numbers. They're not factorable by anything else. I can't divide 5 into 7, and I can't divide 7 into 5. So there are no numbers that we can factor out. So let's look at our variables. I have an x to the 4th, an x squared, and an x to the 1. So I can factor out 1x. And they all have a y squared term. So over here, I will be left with negative 9. X to the 4th divided by x. I'm subtracting my exponent, so 4 minus 1 will leave me with x to the 3rd. And I'm factoring out the y squared, so it won't be there. Plus, my 5 is still there. X squared divided by x, that will leave me with 1x. And the y squareds will, are already taken out. Plus, I have my 7. I'm factoring out an x, and I'm factoring out a y squared. So that's all that we'll have left. All right, our next term, we have 2x minus 5 plus 3a times x minus 5. So we can factor out our x minus 5 because that is what they have in common. The 2 and the 3 will not, you can't pull anything out. This one's the only one with an a, but they have this parenthesis in common. So now I pull this, just like we've done before. I've factored out the x minus 5, so I have a 2 left. Plus, I factored out this x minus 5, I have the 3a left. So that would be our final answer for that. All right, so now we're going to look at factor by grouping. So for factor by grouping, we're going to group the terms in pairs with parentheses. Place the sign of the third term in the second set of parentheses, factor each pair using the GCF, and inside the parentheses should match. This is now the GCF, so factor it out and group the leftover terms together. Okay, so that's a lot of words. Let's talk about what we're going to do here. So if we're looking at this, basically we're grouping this together. You can, instead of doing parentheses, you can just make a line, which is what I'll probably do when I'm teaching it. You just need to take the 4 terms and make 2 groups. So you've got 4, break them up into 2 groups. So somehow split them, and then you're going to factor the GCF out of each part. So here we have an a that factors, and we're left with b minus 4. And here we have a 2 that factors, and we're left with b minus 4. The main thing you want to realize is that if you get the same answer in the parentheses, which is what we just did here, they both had a parenthesis, and then the things that were left ended up over here. Same thing will happen. If the parentheses match, we pull that, factor that out, and then the a is left and the 2 is left. Then that's your clue that you're doing it correctly. It's that step right there. So let's go work some problems to make sure that this makes sense to you. So we are factor by grouping. So if I have xy minus 6x plus 2y minus 12. So like I said, you can do the parentheses where you group it. So you can do this like that. But the problem I have with that is it kind of looks like you're multiplying here and you're not. So what I prefer to do is to just draw one line, because you really just want to split it. It's not division here either, it's just splitting it. All right, so over here, we're looking at this half over here. What does it have in common over here? Well, we have a xy and a negative 6x. So the term that they have in common is the x. So I'll factor out an x. Xy divided by x will get me a y. And negative 6x divided by the x, where the x's will cancel out, we get negative 6. So again, you can take those terms off to the side. I can do xy divided by x and get left with y. And I can do negative 6x divided by the x I'm factoring, and I get negative 6. So you can always go off to the side to do that. Next thing is you always pull down the sign that is here. In this case, it is a plus sign. Over here, between 2y and negative 12, I can factor out a 2. I get left with a y, and 12 divided by 2 would be 6. It is negative, so we have a negative 6. Now, what I want you to notice is this and this, they match. That's when you know you did it correctly. So now, like the previous problem, what they have in common is what's in the parentheses. So I'm going to factor out the common term of y minus 6. What I have left is an x and a plus 2. So that's factor by grouping. Let's do another one. So if we have x cubed plus 5x squared plus 3x plus 15. So again, I'm going to split them in half. On the first half, I have an x cubed, and I have an x squared. So I can factor out an x squared. Again, it's the lowest exponent. So I have an x cubed divided by an x squared. That leaves me 3 minus 2. I have 1x left. The x squareds will go, so that will leave me with a 5. Bring down my plus sign. Between 3x and 15, they have a common factor of 3. That will get me an x, and 15 divided by 3 will get me a 5. And looky there, the x plus 5's match, so I factor out that GCF of x plus 5, and the x squared plus 3 is what is left over when I factor those out. So you start to see that these two terms just come down, because when I factor out that x plus 5, all I have left is an x squared. X plus 5 factored out, I get just the 3. All right, let's look at another one. If we have m squared n squared plus m squared minus 2n squared minus 2. So again, let's split it in half. On the first half, they both have an m squared, and that's all that they have in common. So I will factor out an m squared, and I'll have an n squared plus 1. Remember, you have two factors, or two terms, you have to have two terms in there. Now this time, the sign is a minus, so in this half, they both have a 2, but they both don't have an n. So negative 2 divided by negative 2, well, that's going to go. We'll have an n squared left. Negative 2 divided by negative 2, that will be a 1. And because it's a negative divided by a negative, it's going to be a positive. But let's say you put the negative 1 and you weren't paying attention to the signs. Do they match? They do not. So we'd have to go back and look and see what we did wrong. And then we'd go back and see negative 2 divided by negative 2 is positive 1. Now they match. So that becomes our GCF, our n squared plus 1. So when I factor that out, I have m squared. And over here, when I factor it out, I have the minus 2. All right, let's look at another problem. So our next problem, we have xy plus 5x minus y minus 5. So again, we have 4 terms. Let's split it in half. On the first set, between xy and 5x, they have a factor of x. And that will leave me with a y plus 5 when I factor out the x. Bring down the minus sign. Between a y and a 5, there's nothing they have in common other than a 1. So we're going to factor out a 1. Negative y divided by negative 1 will get me positive y. Negative 5 divided by negative 1 gets me positive 5. Oh, look. They match. I have my signs correct. Factor out my y plus 5, and I'm left with x minus 1. As you continue to do this, you'll see that this term here, will end up here, and this term there will end up there once you have that correct. So you don't have to do as much processing for that. All right, let's do another problem. So our next problem is 15 xy minus 5x minus 12y plus 4. Got that a little spaced. Sorry about that. So again, we're going to split it in half. Between the 15 and the 5, I can factor out a 5, and I can factor out an x. 15 divided by 5 will leave me 3, and I still have the y. Negative 5x divided by 5x will get me a negative 1. Over here, I pull out the minus sign. Between 12 and 4, I have a 3. Oops, sorry. I have a 4. Let me rewrite this one. All right, let's just start this one over. So 15xy minus 5x minus 12y plus 4. I didn't bring my whiteout with me, so. All right, so we factored out of 5x, and we're going to cross this one out. 5x, and we're left with 3y minus 1. Over here, we pull out that minus sign. Between 12 and 4, we can pull out a 4 and end up with 3y. Positive 4 divided by negative 4 is going to be a negative 1. And notice that they match. All right, so now that we have the matching parentheses, that becomes our greatest common factor, and then we end up with 5x minus 4. Now, I am going to tell you, it doesn't matter if you put the 5x minus 4 first and then the 3y minus 1. It doesn't matter. It's multiplication, so whichever one comes first does not matter. You can have this parenthesis first, or you can have it second. It doesn't matter. All right, let's do one more. We have 20xy plus 25x plus 28y plus 35. Again, splitting it in half. Between 20 and 25, we can factor out a 5. They both have an x. So 20 divided by 5 is 4, and we still have the y. 25 divided by 5 would be 5, and we factored out the x. Bring down the plus sign. Between 28 and 35, they both have a 7 in common. 28 divided by 7 is 4. Bring down our y. 35 divided by 7 is 5. Now, let me make a helpful hint here. If you can figure out the first part, but between 28 and 35, you're not sure what they have in common, notice that you're supposed to get a 4y here. So if I wasn't sure what I could factor, I could go, well, what's 28 divided by 4? Well, that's 7. And I also have to have a 5. 35 divided by 5, that's 7. So that could give me the 7, and then I could factor it out. So you can use this first set to help you figure out what is on the other side. All right, they both have, and they match, that 4y plus 5, and then we'll group together 5x plus 7. And that would be your final answer.